Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the last morning of the conference. Glad you're here, and this is going to be a really good session. As I said Wednesday in the opening, there's always a bigger picture, and part of the bigger picture leading from your work at the local level to the state is the national picture, and part of the national picture is doing all we can to collaborate across state boundaries. So the purpose of this session is to learn more about what's happening across our states that join North Carolina. So in the room, we have Joe Siwash, lead for Virginia, Adam DeMars, lead for South Carolina, and through teams, we have Dennis Peterson from Tennessee and Susan Miller from Georgia. I'm not going to take much time today. I just want to make sure that you're prepared to talk about, based on what you hear from these four great individuals, what we can do together and some of the things that they're doing that North Carolina may not be doing, and ideas along those lines too. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe Siwash to get us started. And I think the way we'll do this, each panelist will have 20 minutes. At the end, we'll have plenty of time, I think, for questions. And I hope there will be questions and comments and sharing. And we have a microphone that we can take to you so everybody hears you, including Susan and Dennis remotely. Okay, Joe?
Thank you, Tim. Good morning, everybody. My name is Joe Siwash. I'm the Virginia Geographic Information Network Coordinator. I joined VGen in the Commonwealth in 2017. 12 years preceding that, I was on the CGI staff as Services Program Manager and Enterprise GIS Architect. So I definitely appreciate the opportunity to come back and connect with friends and share about a little bit about VGen. And then slide deck. Okay. There we go. Okay, so VGen was actually created in the early 90s. In the 1997 session, the then VGen coordinator, Bill Shiner, worked with Senator John Watkins to put together legislation that formalized VGen as an agency, gave us specific directions and shalls in Code of Virginia, as well as created the Virginia Geographic Information Network Advisory Board. So with the 1997 session, with the beginning of the fiscal year last year in July, VGen is celebrating its 25th anniversary. So VGen's mission is to support a diverse stakeholder community. This includes all manners of the public sector, private sector, extensive connections with engineering surveying, as well as academic community and citizens. So we have about 20 minutes. There'll be much more information in the slide deck. I'll get through this as quickly as possible, and the slide deck will be available. VGen is one division within the 911 and Geospatial Services Bureau. We are closely tied with the Public Safety Communications Group, which manages 911. And also we have the NGS Outreach Division. This is a group that lives around the state in our 7 agency divisions, and they support local government 911 and GIS and have been instrumental in GIS readiness as well as GIS support in general. Code of Virginia references are here. The references here deal with the creation of the advisory board, the requirements for VGen as a division, as well as my role as division coordinator. We'll touch briefly on the biennial budget. We will not see the powers and duties, but we did reference it here because we are 100% funded through the 911 relationship and the Wireless 911 Fund. We do not receive general funds or do fee-for-service work. The VEGN board is composed of 6 members of the General Assembly. Nominally, the chair of the board comes from that group and has historically. We have 9 citizens appointed by the governor from a variety of stakeholder communities and 4 agency heads from transportation, IT, economic development, and emergency management. The board meets quarterly, and it is an advisory board. In Virginia, there are commissions and boards which direct staff. Advisory boards advise us on the responsibilities granted in code. We won't go through these, but did want to insert them for your reference later on. These are our shalls for VEGN as a division. What's setting a scope for what we can do and are directed to do, and by interpretation, what is outside of our responsibility. The position of VEGN coordinator also has 10 responsibilities. Essentially, my job description is in Code of Virginia, and consequently, what is the responsibility of my role and what is beyond that role. We can actually go through that slide as well. Those are there for future reference when you come back to it. Next slide. So the Commonwealth operates on a biennial budget. Every 2 years, there's a 2-year budget cycle. Our responsibility to manage the orthoimagery project, as well as create and maintain specific base layers related to road center lines, and also the civic address layers and boundaries related to Next Generation 911, is the shall in the budget. So what we are permitted to pursue with our available funds is documented. So here also, this is the 2 other paragraphs of the budget language that tie us to the 911 fund and support the 911 community, as well as the amount for each biennium. The Virginia Base Mapping Program was initially flown in 2002. Bill modeled this program after the program in Tennessee, utilized the same technical specifications, business plan, and RFP vehicle. You can see that we are in the middle of the 6th flying season. The first 2 flying seasons were done in 1 and 2 years respectively, beginning in 2009. We changed to a 4-year cycle to complete the Commonwealth in 3 phases. The 4th year, production can still be done. It can also be used as a carryover or a catch if anything happens untoward with weather or other circumstances. It's also much easier to do an RFP and a selection when you're also not leading production. A couple of other differences between Virginia and North Carolina in this area. Virginia uses a best apparent value RFP process for selection. We do 1 RFP every 4 years, and also our locality buy-ups with our partners in the specific regions work through the VEGN office. So localities get not just the opportunity or the advantages of economy of scale, there are also price breaks for geographically contiguous units to be able to get a lower price. For many medium to small size localities, it would be a very heavy lift to do an RFP, an assessment, a negotiation. And also, in VEGN's case, now that we are in the 3rd decade of the program, we've got managing the ortho products down pretty well, and we can handle all of those technical pieces. Because all of the localities in the Commonwealth operate on a July to June fiscal year, we develop an invoicing and a payback system for 50% on verification of the collection and utility of the aerial capture, and 50% on delivery. So localities also get the benefit of being able to split that cost across 2 fiscal years, and most take advantage of that. Obligatory picture of the base map product. This is downtown Richmond, the General Assembly building in the middle. Just to the east, the governor's residence, the Department of Administration building, as well as the under construction new building for the General Assembly members and staff. This is an infographic that we maintain throughout collection season. You can see we've had 6 flights beginning on 6 flying days, if you will, in the beginning of February through Monday. In the 4 areas or the 4 dates that you see 1 aircraft, that meant there was 1 platform. The 2 stacked aircraft in early February and what would have been about a week ago, and then 4 aircraft on Monday. Currently, we're at 80% collection. We have 13 hours of flying remaining, approximately 9 of that in Southwest Virginia, 4 in a side project for Arlington. Another infographic that we produce to inform our board and our stakeholders. The left column demonstrates milestones that give us talking points to demonstrate the overlap between flying seasons and the work. About 50% of the time, we're doing 2 projects across 2 flying seasons. For this year, the total value is $650K for the purchase order. Approximately 53% of that is from the VEGIN budget relative to the base product, which is 12 inches. The remaining 47% is locality buy a product in the term of 6-inch, 3-inch planometrics and other elevation data. The last line on the slide also demonstrates we do measure and report on the last day of flying seasons, the first day of availability through our clearinghouse and rest services. So that gives us accountability with our stakeholder community and visibility on how we're doing. So in the base map layer support for primarily for 911, this was started back in 2014. We reach out to all 135 localities twice per year, January and July. We receive and request 5 locality maintained data sets listed here. The first thing we do is a report card, which is both tabular and geospatial return. From that, we also do the normalization within each county unit and then aggregate into statewide layers for quarterly publishing. And here you can see on our website, this was actually last week's update. It's currently being updated this morning. We have received 134 out of the 135. The one that's missing is due to a staff member that's left. We'll get that picked up before June and the next subsequent cycle. At the bottom of the screen, you also see that we can demonstrate that we are making incremental progress on a weekly basis towards completing this by June 30th. Our GIS clearinghouse, we did have a platform refresh in 2020, technology refresh transitioned to ArcHub in 2022. For calendar year 2022, we served 724 million hits, 35 terabytes, and maintained better than 3 nines uptime with only 4 hours of downtime for system maintenance. And again, metrics published to our clearinghouse site demonstrating utilization over the past 12 months and within the calendar year. Another infographic used for briefing executive staff and all hands meetings for the last 3 months of performance as well. Our tools that I mentioned earlier, we have transitioned from mostly Model Builder to Python. Those were developed in-house from 2014, maintained through today. Beginning in 2019, we also published those those tool sets for the localities to utilize in their own workflows and be able to generate the same results on their time and their instance. To the right of the screen, you also see this is the data report card template as well as the interpretation guide that goes with the deliverables to the localities in January and July. This is actually data going back from our current cycle back to 2018. The slide's not wide enough to show it going all the way back to 2014. The 7 squares that you see on the far left for the line items, those are the 7 critical errors identified by AT&T and Intrado that will prevent spatial interface upload to the ESINet for the Virginia counties as they deploy. This is a responsibility for each of the PSAPs and localities. Over time, you can see that with the report card tools, we can aggregate and enumerate the exact number and trends for each of the 7 categories. The overall decrease going from left to right demonstrates the commitment from localities as well as overall increase in the data sets that are being used and distributed through the clearinghouse. A couple of screenshots from our Next Generation 911 dashboard. This won an award with ERISA in 2021, used extensively by the localities, the contractors, and also our NGS staff to track and report on deployments. The dial in the far left on the bottom demonstrates 40% completion for Next Generation 911 deployment with geospatial call routing. This is another tab from the dashboard, the dial in the lower right showing that we're at 80% completion for next-gen readiness. So the GIS data will not be an issue with deployment timing. Here we have our scheduled deployments, and this again gets updated weekly for awareness by the localities and their neighbors. And we also have a couple of tabs on the dashboard linking to the financial disposition for deployments. Through this slide in, relative to the most downloaded resources, we've done an extensive number of documents supporting the community. This slide shows that 797 independent segments for provisioning and PSAP boundaries that were completed from mostly January of 20 through December of 21, the teeth of the pandemic. This was incredible work by the Virginia community. I want to recognize the Virginia staff, and specifically Geospatial Program Manager Matt Garricky. I received the 2022 ERISA Leadership Award that's given to one member of the ERISA community for their commitment, and Matt is engaged with their professional development as a program lead for their LEAP conference, as well as on their Next Gen 911 task force. Also want to recognize the other members of the VGen staff. Geospatial Program Manager Jerry Bernhardt manages the VBMP. Stephen Barbie manages systems. Senior Analyst Kenny Brevard, the base layer process, and also April Branton, Michael Boyda, Kendra Williams. Incredibly talented and motivated group. I just give them a little bit of feedback now and then and get to stand in front of groups like you and brag about them. Future directions, data. You saw a lot of materials that I pulled and presented here. At the beginning of the pandemic, we really wanted to focus on telling our message to our new community and making better use of our internal metrics to be able to do that. Sub-address support and improvement. Matt's very involved in the National Emergency Number Association, the directions forward for Z-value, sub-addressing, et cetera. 911 support beyond next-gen deployment. This map shows the change between over a 37-month period where either the PSAP manager changed, the GIS manager changed, the program manager for next-gen deployment changed, or the GIS changed either the vendor that they were working with, or they transitioned models from in-house to vendor or from vendor to in-house. This is 60% turnover across 3 years. Next-gen deployment is a significant milestone and achievement for any locality or PSAP, but is the next milestone across the continuum, and we need to be able to anticipate the need to keep that support rolling. We are working with Virginia Association of Surveyors and the Virginia Mapping and Land Information Systems Group to prepare for NSRS joint training. Enterprise strategy alignments. Many times the benefits of business analysis, sound fiscal planning, portfolio and project management, procurement, and security all get seen as impediments. They're there to protect the practitioner, the agency, the Commonwealth as a whole, and we need to do a better job in integrating that message with our day-to-day management. And then also the data architecture and analytic opportunities, applying formal data architecture as a way to be able to join the communities of GIS and chief data officers. The VAMLS GeoCon is coming up in April, on 11th and 12th. It's on the campus of James Madison University at the Hotel Madison. Links and everything are here. We'd like to invite everybody to attend and appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks for being here, and great work in Virginia, as always. And I made some notes about the things that I want to talk to our folks about. So particularly changing the RFP cycle for the imagery. We do it every year, and we really don't like doing it every year, with all due respect to the 911 board and Executive Director Pokey Harris. So next we'll move to South Carolina and Adam DeMars. Adam?
Hey, everyone. Hope everybody's doing good. You guys are kind of all the champs because you guys were here early, right? So supposedly, you guys got 560 people here. It's kind of putting South Carolina to shame a little bit. So I know I need to step up with respect to North Carolina and how you guys are all making this come to fruition. I mean, it's really cool that the entire community gets together to be able to do these things. We have a little bit smaller community in South Carolina, but again, I think we still have very, very similar projects that are going on and other things that are making our geospatial community stronger year by year. Oh, let's go back one. Collaboration, right? We don't have any borders between, I mean, we have borders, but we don't have any walls between our states, right? Part of the big challenges, especially when you have state boundaries, is how do you collaborate with your partners, and how do you show, geospatially, how can you give data to somebody else and make it better for them, and adversely go the exact opposite direction? How can they help you with some certain things? So again, how do we facilitate some of those relationships across our state boundaries with these things? First of all, I'm with Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office, and it sounds a little daunting when you talk about revenue and fiscal impacts and things like that. Trust me, that's not my section, but we deal with some of the other coordinating things on here. But part of what we do within our agency is we have a state boundary program, we have aerial imagery, we have a council that I manage very similar to Tim's. Again, it's a little bit smaller. Instead of, what do you have, 30? 35 members. We have 13, but it's slowly but surely growing. And again, it takes a little bit of perseverance. Typically always knocking on somebody's door, and I'm a pest. So it's one of those things that I keep knocking on doors saying, hey, it helps the entire community grow as a whole. But people like my DOTs, my 811s, my SLED folks, my DNRs, these are just a couple of agencies that are part of my coordinating council that help to share data across our county or across our state boundaries. Revenue and Fiscal Affairs is this really interesting agency. We used to be called Budget and Control Board. Part of that, part of our agency's, umbrella statement is first and foremost, we're a neutral party agency. We provide data to our legislature as facts and figures specifically. We try not to go down political party lines, so it really makes our agency a little bit different with respect to that. We're also not a cabinet agency, so therefore we don't sit on that same table with some of those other folks with respect to the governor. We're responsible for providing, like it says on here, statistics, fiscal impact statements, analyses. Again, we deal with the governor's office, but we don't necessarily sit on that table. We have a diverse set of individuals, and believe it or not, we're on a good day, we're 75 people. And each one of us, we have 26 major programs. And when I say major programs, that goes from fiscal impact statements for every single bill that's written in the House or Senate that's sent to those folks, to 911, to the GIC, the Geographic Information Council, to the state census repository. We have 26 major programs that literally touch every single agency within our state. So we're super diverse. We got a lot of irons in the fire, and it makes us super valuable. But one of those big value-added items was a few years ago, I think in 1993, there was some dust-ups over some things, and some people got, hey, where am I really at with respect to our state? Back when our states were created, they used these things with lines, and they didn't necessarily have GPS, I don't think, back in the 1800s. But now they do, right? And one of the things that we needed to do is we needed to really consolidate how our boundaries work, not only at the state level, but also at the local level too. So again, one of the things that we did, and this started, I believe, that back in 1993 with the precursory discussions, but then back in 1996 through 2013, we worked in conjunction with North Carolina to redefine our statutory boundaries with respect to both of our states. It was going to and that was a lot of work, especially when you start going into the western part of the state versus the eastern part of the state. You're going from mountains into more or less the coastal areas. But again, this was a huge undertaking, and again, we couldn't do it again without our partner, here in North Carolina. But why did we do it? When issues arise, who are you going to call, right? You're going to call Geodetic Survey, not the Ghostbusters. Some of these things, though, were kind of ghosts out there, and driving up from Columbia this morning, it was kind of interesting. Tim and I, about 18 months ago, maybe even 24 months ago, we got on a phone call because there's a resident in the county of Greenville, which is in South Carolina, just south of Transylvania County. This resident is taxed in South Carolina. This resident has no roads coming from South Carolina to their residence. The only road that gets to their residence is straight through North Carolina to them. And one of the problems that they had is they said, well, we're not getting any services. Tim's shop and my shop got together with both Geodetic Surveys. We ended up getting with both assessors' offices and said, hey, we need to come up with a better solution to this. How do we do this for the citizen that's not going to necessarily have a huge impact? DOT's not going to put a road in because the closest road to them was 18 miles away. We're not going to do that for one resident. Sorry, I know that we need to, but sometimes money is sometimes a problem. But how do we do this in the most effective way? Let's get both assessment offices to talk to each other. And again, this is the whole facilitation, I think, of some of the things that we as leaders in our perspective realms within our states, we have access to all of these unique resources at the local level. And without local level participation, it really makes everything very challenging. But if you have local level participation and you have good working relationships and good communication lines, you can then start breaking down those barriers. So again, driving at 5:45 this morning from Columbia, that was one of the things that popped in my brain. But bigger picture on this is, why did we do this? First and foremost, we have 334 miles between South Carolina and North Carolina. We have roughly, I think it's 401 or 404 miles between South Carolina and Georgia. We need, and more or less all of that in Georgia and South Carolina is a lot of waterway, but there are a lot of legal issues that can come up. One of those legal issues that came up, and it spent 26 years in litigation at a taxpayer cost of $10 million. That's crazy for 25 miles. So if you start taking it and start looking at bigger picture, and you start looking at 334 miles or 400 miles, you can see some of the impacts that can have to not only the citizens that live within those areas, but also the taxpayers that pay the taxes there too. Aerial photography. Joe just gave a great dialogue, and I'm going to get with him after this entire process because I like some of the stats that he put together, especially for his leadership. We got an aerial photography thing that I also manage, and part of that management is first and foremost, it was single one-time appropriations, and it was used for seed funding. That's why over on the side of the screen right there, it's you got a seed, and part of that is we didn't know if we were going to be able to actually continue to fly photography. So what we did is we came up with a slightly different model than North Carolina and Virginia, respectively here. We collect every 3 years, but a full state. 2020 we collected, and then I went through the process of becoming a used car salesman over the course of the past 3 years, and had collective buy-in from all of my counties. Currently, I shouldn't say all of them. Currently, I have 36 counties that are actively participating and contributing to the bigger picture. I have 13 state agencies that are part of my Geographic Information Council that are actively participating and pooling resources to fund this for 2023. And in fact, we just finished data collection this past Saturday for the entire state. But unlike North Carolina, their refresh rate is roughly 25 counties per year, so 25% of the county each year. We just try to do it a little bit differently. But one thing that we try to do is we work with our neighboring state to say, hey, if you guys didn't fly imagery in that year and you need imagery for those sections and we already did it, let's go ahead and provide that imagery back to North Carolina to facilitate 911 needs. DOTs. We all deal with DOTs, right? I think some of us have complaints in other states, not South Carolina if you've driven there. Maybe 95 going into Georgia. Just don't tell my DOT folks this. No, I'm kidding. No, DOT is very, very, very well aware of some of the challenges that you have with respect to roads, right? The last thing you want to do is you want to go down the road, and as I entered into North Carolina this year, this picture popped back into my head. What if we had that, you know when you're driving down the road and it says, lane shift? What if we had lane shifts at every single state boundary? How many accidents would that cause? How much public safety dollars would be spent doing these things? So aligning those roads, right? We want to make sure that our DOTs are working in conjunction with each other, so that way when 77 is going to get patched in South Carolina, that the DOT folks in North Carolina know the same thing. Again, with the partners over in Georgia, it'd be the exact same process. We go through that process and try to create like a comparing that match point, right? So DOT works, again, closely with North Carolina and Georgia. They collaborate on the state map for each state. They also have good professional assistance within each office. And again, it's all about verifying some of those state and local boundaries and then those snapping points for each one of those. Interestingly enough, my DOT contact, again, that sits on the council with us, provided this. With respect to the roads that they maintain locally within house in South Carolina and those that are maintained with our neighbors. And you can see basically the offsets that we're affiliated with it. So what we want to do is over time and as those roads change geometries a little bit or get widened, whatnot, because again, the South is not slowing down with respect to growth. We want to make sure that we're making those almost on point with respect to like I-20 in Georgia and North Carolina on the I-95 corridor. We want to make sure that we're getting those closer and closer. This gets a little morbid, but part of what we deal with, at least from the EMD and maybe SLED, has anybody heard of SLED over the course of the past month from a specific law case or a trial that's been going on in our low country? Okay, SLED, State Law Enforcement Division. Actually, those guys are a bunch of really good guys, so I don't know if they really got thrown under the bus a little bit too much. But anyways, SLED is also one of our council members also, and they do and deal with, again, some of those things that are unfortunate. That's part of life. But what they do is they use our imagery and some of our geospatial services to deal with witnesses, that maybe those witnesses go across state lines. Maybe that cellular activity goes across state lines to find those specific vehicles. Again, they work with local assessment offices. And we had, okay, there was a specific incident and this individual has still never been found, but the individual that works for SLED was using, GPS technology. He was using Google Earth at the time because the imagery at that time was a little newer than what we had, but he was using it and trying to trilaterate the exact location of the last pinpoint from that cell site. Also, they needed to make sure that they could figure out where that vehicle was. Just so happens the vehicle was found in Florence, not even remotely close to North Carolina. So again, geospatial has its place within each one of our communities, and it has a bunch of different levels and variations that they use for all of these things. 811, call before you dig. We all have 811 offices within our states. Did you call before you dig? I didn't. And if you don't, what happens? You're gonna, you could potentially break a gas line or something like that. But working with the utility companies, our SC 811 again goes across state boundaries, especially when you're looking at that Rock Hill, York County, Mecklenburg area where you have significant development. Those resources really need to be in collaboration. Again, it's not like North Carolina and South Carolina, Virginia. It's not like we don't see storms on a relatively annual basis called hurricane season. But even when we have catastrophic events, those things, those organizations come together to facilitate support amongst each other. And again, this is going across state boundaries. Department of Natural Resources, the Heritage Trust. Again, just like everything that we have like in our state, and again, I think maybe I'm a little biased to this, but I think our state is really, really diverse, not only with the population and the people and the demographics that we have, but it's also really diverse with respect to the type of things that we have within nature. Nature's going to move regardless of what we put in its place. And when we have natural heritage trust sites and we have maps that facilitate data that goes up to the regional level, it goes up to the next state over, and then it goes into the southeast regional level. These are all concepts that sharing data really makes it that much more beneficial for us to be able to conduct business state to state. Because without being able to share that data, we're kind of left with a blind spot with respect to where is that animal, or where is that that flora or fauna going? Where is it moving? Where is it migrating to? Can we keep those areas intact, and can we maybe work with our landowners to possibly create some barriers between the development that's going on? So then I thought, and I think, from a neighborly standpoint, what are some future ideas that kind of have come up in dialogue and discussion, not only, with imagery and maybe address points and center lines and some parcel stuff and cell phone stuff with respect to 911 and the public safety community, but my state's a little bit different because I also have to have buy-in from my local governments. Over the course of the past 4 years, I've had a lot of buy-in and a lot of interest to say I can share more and more data. I'm not there yet at 100% with all of my counties, but again, it's slowly but surely chipping away at the iceberg. But when it comes to supporting, again, my neighbor to the north or my neighbor to the west, I have that availability to say, hey, County A or County B, these folks need it for these specific use case scenarios. And again, when you're dealing with intergovernmental agreements, those things typically work a lot faster. Again, continue state initiative impacts to support those impacts for our citizens. One thing that came up when I was talking about this with my division director, I said, commerce might be one of those things that we could theoretically discuss a lot more. When you start looking at what the facilities that were created for the Panthers, in York County, how many billions of dollars were part of that? You have a lot of people coming, in from maybe North Carolina, maybe setting up or buying homes because maybe it's a little bit cheaper. But at the end of the day, they're still spending money in North Carolina and vice versa. The other thing that kind of came up with this, I was in Publix the other day, and a young man was stocking the shelves, and he said, it was really weird because when I was working at Publix at, right there on the border, we had 14 aisles of groceries, and most of our clientele was coming from North Carolina because it was a little bit cheaper. Maybe it's a little cheaper in South Carolina. Again, REST endpoints, how can we facilitate better data sharing? Because if we update it locally on our end, you guys can, and other people can just ingest it. And it's an easier update, and it's easier to facilitate that data across the board. But with respect to that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. I appreciate the opportunity that you all have invited me, specifically Tim and the council invited me up here for this. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks.
So, excuse me, definitely another perspective, different situation in South Carolina, but equally important to know about, and kudos to what you've been able to accomplish, Adam. Okay, we're going to move virtually, and batting third, coming to us from Nashville, Tennessee, is Dennis Peterson. Dennis is doing great work out there, and will share his perspective on what he's doing and possibly what we could be doing better together. Dennis?
Thanks, Tim, and good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I wish I could be there in person, obviously, but we'll have to settle on the virtual environment this morning for my presentation. When Tim first called me and asked me to participate, I was very excited because, as he alluded to, earlier, there is definitely a need for collaboration across state lines. And as the two previous speakers have mentioned as well, and highlighted some needs for for collaboration amongst border states. I'm going to highlight something in particular data theme. But before I do that, let me just briefly give you some background on who we are and what we do. I serve as the state GS coordinator, and we're housed in the Department of Finance Administration in the Strategic Technology Solutions Division, which is basically the IT arm for state government, okay? And as you can imagine, similar to other states on the panel today, we administer our base mapping program. We have a data clearinghouse. We provide services to other state agencies in terms of web application development and support, training, access to other data sets within the state. And then something which I call special projects, which are some themes of leveraging geospatial technology, whether it's administering our broadband grant program in our state. The other speakers also mentioned NG 911. That's a common theme across many, if not all, the 50 states currently in terms of priorities of leveraging geospatial technology. And then lastly, we are a FEMA cooperating technical partner. So we have a staff person that's assigned to support FEMA and our Tennessee Emergency Management Agency on flood risk mitigation GIS efforts. If you'd like to learn more about the high level, you can see the URL there on the screen, tnmap.tn.gov. So briefly, a little chronology. The initial framework data development through the Tennessee Base Mapping Program was a 10-year effort from 97 to 2007. And it was primarily funded through a partnership between state and local governments across Tennessee to build out our statewide imagery, statewide parcels, administrative boundaries, hydrography data, and digital elevation. We expanded our horizons a little bit to include some federal collaboration, specifically working with the U.S. Geological Survey on their 3D elevation program. I'm sure North Carolina has been one of the leaders in the country in terms of developing digital elevation data through LiDAR technology. And so Tennessee got on board with 3DEP in 2015 through 2020. And so we built out our statewide QL2 hydro-flattened LiDAR data set. And again, if you'd like to learn more about that, you can go to lidar.tn.gov. But all this is to lead up to what I want to talk about today, and that's our hydrography efforts. A little history again on hydrography in our state. I'm sure a lot of you in the audience have used or are using the National Hydrography Data Set. In Tennessee, the NHD data is not maintained very well, and we tried an effort to conflate our Tennessee very accurate, spatially accurate features to the NHD data model. And it was a very challenging effort in terms of using some of the USGS tools, dealing with the complexities of the NHD data model, and just the lack of interest in terms of the stakeholders and coordination and leadership in trying to make that effort happen. So the results were not successful. What we really have is two different data sets for hydrography. One is the standard NHD data that's, in many cases 40 plus years old. And then we have our Tennessee hydro data. It's very accurate spatially, but it's not in widespread use. So what we're trying to do now is refocus our efforts on hydrography and specifically working with USGS on their 3D hydrography program, which is really built off of the success of the 3D elevation program. So as you can imagine, there's a strong relationship between digital terrain and water flow, right? And so there's some technologies out there called elevation-derived hydrography, where using machine learning and AI, you can extract water features from the digital terrain. So what we're looking at here in this slide is the upper left corner, you see the bare earth hillshade from the 1 meter DEM, and the corresponding in the lower left is the NHD features for hydrography. But what we want to do is leverage our QL2 LiDAR data, which you see in the upper right, the bare earth hillshade, and generate that new set of very accurate hydrography in the lower right. So that's the goal for what we're trying to do through the 3D hydrography program, is take advantage of the investment that we've made in our QL2 LiDAR to build out this new set of hydrography data for not only for Tennessee, but obviously USGS has a vision for doing this for the entire nation. And they're going to be leveraging the best practices from the 3DEP program in terms of how that's going to be administered and managed at the national level. They're going to be leveraging their GIPSY contracts, and usually what happens when they solicit input for projects, it's through what they call a broad agency announcement. And so we're going to be working with USGS on this, and we're actively monitoring progress in terms of where they are in terms of funding at the national level, and very eager to see this move forward. So the data that's going to be developed through 3DHP is going to eventually replace or supplement the National Hydrography Data Set, or NHD. And I'm not going to get into the particulars of this, but specifically, there are issues surrounding data quality in the NHD data set. So some of those examples are, as you can imagine, when you have a 40-year-old plus data set, the blue line streams that were digitized off the USGS topo quads don't align with the terrain data that was collected through 3DEP over the past, more recently, 5 years. And so you can see some of these areas circled in green where those blue line streams don't align with the depressions in the terrain model. There's other features in NHD that should not exist, that don't correspond to the elevation model. Features that go up and down over a ridge, for example. Missing features in the NHD. Data inconsistencies of how the data was originally digitized. You can see in the middle of the screen here where there's more dense features collected on the particular topo quad than the surrounding areas. So what we're trying to get to is what you see here. This is an example of one of the pilot projects that USGS did in, I believe, the state of Oregon, where you've got the bare earth hillshade and you've got the new extracted hydro features that are fully connected, have flow direction, and are in 3D so that it can support 3D modeling. Just a couple other quick examples. So you can see the density of that stream network and the features that are extracted from the LiDAR data using that elevation-derived hydrography technology. So where are we at currently in Tennessee regarding 3DHP? Well, we're trying to promote this to a variety of stakeholders, federal, state, and local level. We're currently working with USGS on a contract for 3DHP and developing a pilot project for this effort. And specifically, this is where I want to talk about border state collaboration. I think everyone understands that the vast majority of GIS data that's developed at the state level is developed for the most part on a county by county basis, whether it's imagery or parcels or address points. But in terms of hydrography, we're looking at, USGS is looking at collecting this not on county boundaries or administrative boundaries, but on hydrologic units. And I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with hydrography data or the hydrologic unit codes, but we're talking about either a subbasin or a watershed level for data collection. And so our pilot project here just northeast of Knoxville is going to be a HUC 10 that encompasses portions of 4 counties here you see shaded in the various colors. And then the purple outline is that HUC 10 watershed. But when you talk about statewide collection, obviously watersheds don't stop at the state line, right? And so we're going to have to work together with Virginia, North Carolina, and my 6 other border states. Yes, Tennessee and Missouri have the most bordering states out of any state in the nation of 8. So I've got my work cut out for me in terms of collaborating and trying to manage this data collection effort through 3DHP. So you can see here, I zoomed into the far northeast corner of the state of Tennessee in the Tri-Cities area. And so you can see the HUC 8 subbasins that straddle both Tennessee and Virginia, North Carolina, and of course, North Carolina and Tennessee. So initially, as I pointed out earlier, the pilot project and another project we have planned for FY24 is going to be focused entirely within the state because frankly, we're just not ready yet to try and tackle some of the issues of, answering the questions of how are multi-state HUC 8 subbasins funded? How are they submitted in USGS proposals? There's a variety of technical issues and administrative issues surrounding how we manage that data collection across state lines. So where we are currently, as I mentioned, we're finalizing our contract with USGS, and we'll be acquiring our pilot project later this spring. And then again, we're going to be collecting probably a 6 HUC 8 sub-basin project in Middle Tennessee for FY24. And obviously looking forward to working with Tim and Joe and Susan, obviously, on trying to figure out how we're going to manage this across interstate boundaries moving forward. So that was a lot in a short amount of time, but thanks for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I'll turn it back over to Tim. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Great work out there in Tennessee, and gives us something meaty to think about for the future, right? This is not a simple, hydro is not a simple thing to try to handle. Okay, batting cleanup coming to us from Atlanta. My good friend Susan Miller, who's going to share the great things that she's doing and her team's doing in Georgia.
Excellent. Thanks, Tim. Can you verify that you can hear me and see my screen?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. Okay, well, hi, neighbors. Tim, thank you so much to you and your team for inviting all of us. This is just wonderful, and I am so excited to be here with all of my amazing colleagues, and then also with a bunch of folks from your team. So Georgia's a little late to the game. We have only established a geospatial information office, or a group, to be thinking holistically at a state scale about geospatial data We established it a little over 5 years ago. So I was a little envious hearing all the histories. You know, I know that you all in North Carolina have a very long, robust history. And then Joe, or I think it was Joe, yes, said something about 22 years. And so we're 5 years old. So we're kind of a fledgling, embryonic geospatial information office. But there's a little bit of a benefit in coming last because we get to look to the great states that we've heard from today and your own state there in North Carolina as mentors. So I do turn to everybody that's been talking today as a mentor to say what has gone really well in your state and what hasn't gone well. What would you do differently if you could start over again? And also technology is advanced, right? So we have different choices maybe than other states have had when they built a program 20 years ago. And also with our fledgling little office, we are lacking in funding. So you'll hear me talk about that. And kind of a lot of the choices that we make based on the fact that we don't have secure funding at this point. So let me go ahead and jump in. So Georgia, just so you know, you guys are clear. You guys are up here, and I'm talking to you from right here. So hey guys, and I get to talk to you today because we share a little bit of a boundary. It's not as big as the rest of my colleagues have talked to you about today, but I wanted to share a few little fun facts about Georgia. One that's super fun for us in the GIO is the fact that we have 159 counties. Only Texas has more counties in the United States than Georgia. And we are teetering around 300 or 537, about to be 8 cities. So that means that we get to coordinate with approximately 700 local governments when we are talking about doing working on spatial data. And since it was International Women's Month, I'd like to give the room the opportunity to guess how many of our 159, or Women's Day, I said month, sorry. How many of our counties are named after women? See if anybody wants to guess in the audience. And Tim, you can tell me.
I see.
Anybody stepping up?
Hope says 10. Ben says 0.
Okay, well, it's in
Any other
between
guesses?
that.
5.
It's in between that. Hart County right here. We only have one, and it's Hart County right over here. So it's not quite at the border with you guys up here, but you know, so we have one. The cotton gin was invented here. Georgia's the largest largest state east of the Mississippi, and we're almost at 11 million people as of the last census, so fairly large. So let's talk about why we love working with North Carolina. I have had the opportunity to work with Tim for a number of years, and am so thankful for his mentorship. And basically, when it comes to statewide data roll-up, Georgia really hopes to be like North Carolina when we grow up. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the National States Geographic Information Council. They are the national authority and group of state GIOs who do a report card on the GIS data maturity for every state. And Georgia is just standing here at a D+. And it's not because we're doing things badly, it's because we just don't have statewide data. So everybody today you've heard talk has these beautiful statewide data sets. Georgia doesn't have those. And so we are failing in almost every imaginable data framework. On the other hand, here's North Carolina. You guys are sitting at an A-. So you can imagine that we want to be like you. And if I use this tool correctly, I can swipe this over and give Georgia an A- and take all your grades. So that's pretty much why we like working with North Carolina. So here I want you to meet the team. You're only interacting with me today. I'm the Geospatial Information Officer, but my much, much better half is Natalie Lee. She is the Geospatial Data Programs Director and is an amazing asset for myself and for Georgia. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about some key highlights that we would like to brag about from the last year of our work. Again, remember that we are fledgling compared to everybody else that you've heard from. So one of our greatest successes over the last 12 months has been to create the Georgia GIO strategic plan. And in that plan, we basically lay out the roadmap for creating a common operating picture for Georgia. In that plan, we talk about and define what is winning, what is it that the GIO wants to do, and how will we know when we've achieved it? And then basically that boils down into a set of strategic goals, right? So we define those goals, and then most importantly, we talk about how are we going to meet those goals. And we're going to meet those goals through a series of ongoing tasks. You know, every year we'll have a new set of tasks for moving ourselves forward to growing up, you know, to be like Adam and Joe and Dennis and Tim. And most of our activities fall into three basic buckets: facilitating collaboration, enabling base map layers, and providing geospatial services and resources to the geospatial community at large in Georgia. So we're very, very excited about having this roadmap. The other great thing that we're working on right now is creating our state geospatial advisory council. We heard a lot of references to those. You know, Adam talked about having 13 folks on his. You all in North Carolina have 30. Well, we're just standing ours up. We haven't even had our inaugural meeting yet. We hope to have that in April or May. But we're really excited about it. And the big reason that we're excited about it is we feel like it's going to amplify the voice of the geospatial community. Right now, the community is unfortunately very siloed, right? There's not a lot of activity that pulls everybody together, and everybody's focused on their work as they should be. But I think it's really going to help to elevate the plight of data, right, all the way up the food chain to the highest levels in Georgia. And we're putting together a pretty good group of people to be the inaugural advisory council. We're kind of stacking it full of, you know, the power players, the people who we think could maybe go out and help secure us funding and help to convince leadership in the state that focusing on statewide data, giving it the attention that it deserves, is really critical. Something that I see happen all the time is people not valuing data, right? Data is an asset, and it needs to be treated like the valuable asset that it is. And I see that not happening in a lot of places, and not appreciating the concept of rolling data up from a local level to a regional level to a state level and then a national level. So we're dabbling in all of those areas, and we're real excited about it. So we're thrilled about our advisory council. We've been putting quite a bit of focus into helping set up the scaffolding, if you will, for getting Georgia's GIS data ready for NextGen 911. And so I have complete envy of the folks on this panel today who are, especially Joe, I think said, you know, yeah, our GIS, he didn't say our data house is in order, but I'm gonna put those words in his mouth. We're ready to go. Well, we are not ready to go. But we did spend the last year and a half working very diligently to set up the framework to make it possible to move forward. And so what we have as a result of our activities is we have created a very highly secure cloud-based enterprise GIS ecosystem in which to consume data. We developed Georgia's first geospatial data standards, and those are based on the data sets that are required for NextGen 911. So addresses, road center lines, and various emergency service boundaries. And then we worked with an amazing partner called One Spatial to develop a set of tools that we call our aggregation and validation tools. But essentially what they do is they allow local governments to upload their data in whatever format they're natively storing their data in. And it takes their data and it puts it into the 911 data standard. And then it crunches through it and it says, how are you doing? You know, are you missing data? Do you have data violations? Do you have gaps and overlaps? What's happening with your data? And it produces a report that then is sent back to the local government saying, you know, here are some places where you need to clean up your data. And so they can come back and continue to use these aggregation and validation tools. And eventually we'll be able to report much like my colleagues today and be able to say, we're NextGen 911 ready. And until then, we're really excited about our aggregation and validation tools. Our folks have been asking for that for a very long time to be able to have data standards. It was funny when I started working in Georgia, folks were like, oh, everybody's gonna be resistant to standards. And the GIS community is like, would you just give me a standard? Like, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Just give it to me and I'll work with it. So we were excited to get that rolled out. And then another aspect of our work for NextGen 911 is something that I will echo that everybody has talked about, which is boundary issues, right? And stitching together, you know, X, whatever X is, whether it's address data or road center lines. And so we acknowledged, especially on the emergency service boundaries, that we needed to get folks into a room and walk them through, you know, who's going to respond to which call. And so we've developed a playbook for that, for doing reconciliation of boundary issues along jurisdictional boundaries. So we're real proud of that. And we have a beautiful 911 hub site, but I'm not going to go into that right now. I kind of already touched this, so I'm going to skip over it. But essentially, we follow the lead. We're building dashboards. It's not displaying properly on here, but building dashboards and using, you know, public humiliation as a way to help, you know, push people into compliance. Another thing that we're doing, and I think this is maybe interesting because it's quite different than what everybody else has talked about today. We too have an imagery program and a LiDAR program. And let me just describe what that means. For us, we don't have the money or the staff or the capacity to do custom flights. And so we have turned to a relatively new paradigm of buying commercial off-the-shelf imagery. And I talk about imagery as, like, if you think of it as a pocket knife, you've got all these different tools, right? And that you can pull out from that. And one of those is a custom flight. But you might also need, you know, like a little toothpick, right? And you want to pull out your toothpick. Some of those could be a commercial off-the-shelf product where you buy imagery for a fraction of the cost that you would pay for a custom flight, and you get what you get. You don't get to say, fly it at the sun angle. You get what a provider already has. And there are lots of cool, innovative partnerships that are being created around the world for collecting imagery. So historically, we've had big vendors who collect imagery for companies like Apple and Microsoft and Google, or they collect it themselves. And then they have resold it in the past. But now you're seeing other groups, and we've chosen to work with a company through a partnership with Sanborn, a company called Vexcel, which is a consortium of insurance companies. And they fly imagery to prevent fraud, essentially. So that's our imagery program. We're going to buy commercial off the shelf product. Again, we get what we get. We can't customize it at all. It was flown when it was flown. We don't get to say anything like leaf off conditions or sun conditions or tidal conditions or anything. We just get whatever they have. And we believe that that's going to meet 70-80% of our users' needs. And then we'll just have to deal with the fact we can't meet all the people's needs all the time. And if people need custom imagery, then they're still going to have to raise the money and fly that. So we're excited about working with Vexcel for a couple reasons. And as you've already seen, I use the swipe tool to my own devices. So ignore the fact this is not showing the same place. What this is showing is we've created a contract where local and state agencies, local governments and state agencies can do buy-ups, right? And so it really streamlines the purchasing process. And they can do things like buy obliques. And this is an example of an oblique from our capital. And then also something that Vexcel has that's unique is their Gray Sky program. And what that is they are flying for insurance companies. Insurance companies care what happens to places post-disaster. So they have an entire program that gets planes up in the air immediately after a disaster, as soon as it's safe for an airplane to get up in the air, and they take pictures. And so their Gray Sky program is amazing for doing rescue and recovery, and also for doing long-term kind of mitigation planning, right? We had a flood, what happened? And we can, or in this case, we had a hurricane, we can see what happened. So we're really excited about that Gray Sky program for our emergency managers and for our hazard mitigation programs in Georgia. We have a LIDAR program. Our LIDAR program consists of having applied for and received 3 DEP grants in 2017, 18, and 19 for the acquisition of QL2 level LIDAR for the state. And we recently received delivery of that LIDAR. So we're pretty excited to now actually build out a LIDAR program for the state, which we hope will include derivative products. We also have a wonderful project that was very precedent setting for us in the Geospatial Information Office, by which we needed a mechanism for gathering data from local governments, right? So we've got the 700 local governments all creating data to no particular standard, right? And this has been going on for decades. And so we started a pilot project a couple of years ago with the Department of Transportation, where they are utilizing our regional governments and their GIS and planning staff to actually validate road information, road attribute information in particular, to be in compliance with federal regulations related to MAP 21, which was I forgot the acronym, mapping for moving ahead for progress in the 21st century or something like that. And I think it's changed name since then, and I apologize for not knowing that, but the federal standard for road management. And this has been really great because it is setting the precedent for any other data set, any other framework data set for which the authoritative data owner is a local government. So like addresses and road center lines and things like that. So very excited about that. We've continued support for COVID. We did quite a bit of work, including working with all the hospitals. So we continue to support that. We're excited about a project that we're working on, and this is very relevant to the conversation today. We are working on a project with One Spatial, Florida and Alabama, to kind of start quantifying quantitatively and qualitatively, what does it look like to align various boundaries along state borders. and how can we better help the development of the national spatial data infrastructure. And this is on the screen is just showing you an example. All these little dots, the orange and yellow dots, are gaps and overlaps at the Florida-Georgia state boundary. You know, that's a hot mess, right? So that probably should get cleaned up. And what does that look like? And so we've worked with One Spatial to kind of develop a, you know, a fairly simplistic process of just, you know, you look for all the data that you have, you decide what's authoritative, you work with stakeholders, and you just do this iterative process until you come out with a decision that then is accepted by the community and put into the national spatial data infrastructure. And then lastly, on our projects, we work in an advisory role for a bunch of amazing, amazing groups. We've been supporting our 911 authority, as I mentioned, our hazard mitigation team, which is housed at the Georgia Emergency Management Homeland Security Agency. They do amazing work, and we're looking for lots of opportunities to partner with them. We have a group in Georgia who's been assigned to improve the speed at which sexual assault kits are processed in the state. They are processed at a appallingly slow rate. And so we're helping advise them on the development of a tracking system to make sure that those move through the process much more quickly. The Georgia Sentinel landscape, if y'all don't know in North Carolina about when all my other colleagues from their states, the Sentinel landscape project is an amazing national level project, and it's a partnership between military installations and a lot of federal military agencies and conservation organizations. So in a nutshell, military bases care about and need a certain amount of land in order to conduct the various, execute the various things that they need to do. So like testing equipment and things like that. And so they need large masses of continuous land. Well, they also, you know, care about other things, including conservation. And so they pulled in conservation organizations and created this partnership where they work with landowners all across the country to dedicate large contiguous areas of land to support military installation activities and conservation activities. And we're basically being the GIS branch for the Georgia Sentinel landscape, and we love it. We think they're amazing. So anyway, I'll just kind of close up. I won't go through all these, but we work in this advisory role of, you know, helping people understand how to think spatially and kind of, you know, how to apply geospatial sciences and geospatial analytics to their work to improve the quality of their work. And then I'll just kind of close out by saying that, you know, partnership is our key to success. You saw that we are two people. And so we wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for the amazing amount of public and private sector folks that we get to work with. And we consider North Carolina to be one of them. We don't work extensively with, you know, everybody that we should be in North Carolina, but we certainly see you as part of our team. And we hope that many of you who live along our border are maybe already working with our cities and our counties, or maybe our regional governments to coordinate data development. And we're just so grateful that you invited us to be here with you today. And with that, I will pass it back to Tim.
Thanks, Susan. Lots of activity in your state as the others. So, you know, one thing that occurs to me is something from one of the presentations yesterday. It was my chief data officer in North Carolina had a chart that said crawl, walk, run, and soar as 4 phases of activity. I think all of us have been in the crawling phase, you know, in various things. We get to the point where we soar. But it's a process, and it takes a long time. So kudos to you for being that leader in Georgia to get things rolling. So we've got 10 minutes before the break. I don't want to limit it to 10 minutes, but I hope there are questions from the audience that's here. Thank all of you for being here, all four of you for being a part of this today. And I know you have very busy schedules, but let's take some questions. And we're going to use a microphone so Susan and Dennis can hear you. Up. Can't see. Okay. Say who you are, by the way, and maybe who you represent.
All right, hello. My name's Gary Engel. I'm from ICEYE. We're a synthetic aperture radar satellite company, and I heard lots of awesome collaboration. It's really interesting with different things that are going on. Is SAR a technology that you've considered using for GIS for state work?
Great question. Maybe not necessarily on, in my very narrow aspect of what I deal with, but when you talk about that, it's a whole different set of data that's affiliated with it. I could probably see, SAR data more or less like maybe tree canopy type stuff, maybe DOT work, but not necessarily. I don't personally see it within the realm of like maybe 911 and some of the things that I have to deal with respect to local assessment offices and stuff like that. But definitely a technology that's out there that's definitely worth exploring.
Anyone else want to respond? Okay, next question.
My name is Andrew Stevens. I'm work actually in a family business. It's land surveying and also GIS. I kind of am the GIS side of it. And we're actually based out, at least in part, in the far western tip of North Carolina. So this is largely directed at Susan and also Tim, with a nod to our friends in South Carolina and the work y'all have done on the state line. I know from working with some data sets across the state line from Georgia and North Carolina that there are discrepancies between the state lines, some of which I'm sure y'all probably already know, can even carry over into tax-related matters and other things. Is there any focus forthcoming on trying to define that line itself? Of course, remembering with a nod to history, that one has literally been fought over with actual military action in years past. Not wanting that to occur, of course, but is there any effort on the side, either from Atlanta or from Raleigh, to try to define that and nail that down a little better?
Okay, Susan, you want to take a shot at that, and I'll add. Not literally take a shot at it.
Tim told me that we were going to arm wrestle over it. Yeah, that is not something that I have even begun to get involved with at this point. There are so many other things. And frankly, I think that's probably not a technology issue or a data issue, but more of a political issue is kind of where I would throw it. But let's hear what Tim has to say.
Okay. Well, I did have once we did the North Carolina-South Carolina border, and that was headed up, in part by Gary Thompson from the North Carolina Geodetic Survey as part of a boundary commission work that was done. I asked him about Georgia, and he basically conveyed that this is really an issue, and we're not going to touch trying to get those parties together right now. We might revisit it somewhere down the road. I don't know. Hope, do you have any additional insight into that? Yeah. I don't think Georgia's in the offing. That doesn't mean we're going to start firing guns. Okay. Other questions?
That was the best non-answer that I could give, and I
Well,
I apologize for that.
We're both trying to be political animals, and we're not political animals.
Yes, exactly. Oh, thank you, Tim. If it was up to me and Tim, we'd just split it, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. We'd figure it out.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Rich Elkins, and I'm the director of the Land Records Management Program at the Secretary of State's office. Our office was created back in the 70s as part of the Land Records Modernization Project. And we've had a couple of different homes over the years, but since the 90s, we've been in the Secretary of State's office. And I kind of wanted to say I'm jealous of you guys being, having this network and knowing who your, compatriots are across the border. So, while there may not be a program specifically like ours, I'd really love to know who is your parcel person, because I'd love to have a network of other states, people that are, the primary person dealing with cadastral mapping and parcels and maybe some of the other things that we do deal with. So just, wanted to make a statement, that's something probably have to reach out by email and get that information. But if you've got that person in your state, I'd love to get in contact with them. If you want to comment or.
Sure, yeah. Anyone want to comment?
Yeah, I put my parcel code contact in the chat. I'm not sure if you could share that, Tim, with the gentleman that was asking. But go ahead, Susan.
Oh, I will do the same. I can tell you that our parcel guy is, there is no statewide parcel program, but our Department of Revenue does physically collect parcel data from every county, and every county is required to share their parcel data publicly. And about 98% of Georgia counties use QPublic as their venue for doing that. So QPublic is the go-to de facto tool, but I will also share the name of a guy at Department of Revenue who is the closest thing we have to and we're trying to partner with him to actually go ahead and take the data and be able to pull it together and publish it.
South Carolina doesn't necessarily have a parcel office. My office does, though, collect and maintain all 46 of our counties on a yearly basis. But one of the huge challenges that South Carolina has, and again, I think this is nationwide, is we don't have any statewide standardization. So all 46 of our counties, they can collect whatever CAMA records that they want or facilitate. The other really challenging part to this is, some of our rural, and again, we're dealing with some rural counties within all of our states here. Some of our rural counties really have a serious issue because they don't have the technology, they don't have the staff to maintain that data. So sometimes, you get that yearly parcel data set, it's the exact same year after year after year after year. And the CAMA records might not necessarily change either. So while we get that and we kind of maintain it and keep it in-house kind of for state purposes, and we don't necessarily disseminate it because it's not really our data, it is one of those pretty significant challenges at least from our state's perspective.
In Virginia, we do have the Virginia Department of Tax. We do have GIS colleagues there. In the base mapping program that VGen manages, we do collect parcel data in January and July twice per year. We provide an aggregated geometry, but a separate set of relational tables. Similar to South Carolina, we have no standard. We have literally two different parcel identification number schemas and a variety of information based on the CAMA system that is jurisdiction by jurisdiction. So we publish the best as is through the Virginia GIS Clearinghouse. We know we need to do better, but we also need, it's taxes. Virginia Department of Tax has to be the lead on that. We're simply the technical support.
Good, thanks. Hope?
So I may be the last one. I'm Hope Morgan. I'm the GICC chair currently. Thank you all for coming. I want to expand on what Rich talked about and say it would be really good. You all sit in different worlds in the states that you're in. It would be really good to kind of figure out what the different divisions, sections, departments are and how those crosswalk with each other so that we could do that coordinated effort if there was some topic like parcels that could be shared. So with that in mind, I think one of the working groups that we talked about was potentially getting with you guys maybe twice a year. The topics that you have brought up today would be the start of that conversation, and we could actually look at how we could work together. So I would really appreciate if you would be willing to share that time with us, and we would love to work with you more.
Very good.
I hope.
Other questions? So the bigger picture, I know you're going to get tired of hearing me say it, but I see Ken Schaefer from FGDC in the background there. And my thought is, how could we identify things that we should be doing for the nation and work together starting today to do that? Recognizing that we're all at different points in our journey, but are there things that we can start working on? And maybe it starts with those periodic meetings or conversations that lead to something that could be contributed to the bigger picture. Now, I didn't want to force you to say anything, Ken. But.
No, I appreciate it. Ken Schaefer, Federal Geographic Data Committee. Susan, you made my day mentioning the NSDI. That was fantastic. But I also want to make a pitch here. So we are just starting on the next NSDI strategic plan, and we're going to take a little bit different approach this time. We'll see how it works. But the plan is going to be more of a decadal plan. And so looking out longer term, but then backing it up with implementation plans from different sectors. And so states is one of them. And, we do have to be careful as a nation, as a community, not to make those themselves stovepipes, but, to get input from the different sectors and how the sectors see themselves helping to move the NSDI forward. So we'll see how that goes, but that's something that's going to be, you'll hear a lot more about it this year, and then the actual draft plan should be out for review in early 24. So, thank you. And this is a fantastic session here. This is amazing. So, thank you.
Anybody else with a question? Okay, I'd like to thank all the states for contributing today. Like I said, they're very busy people doing great work. And just the fact that you would take time out of your Friday to talk about what you're doing with us is very special to all of us here. Thanks, everybody.